Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Extending the Power of NinjaOne via API. Let's give everyone a minute to get in, get settled, and get ready, and then we will get started. While we're waiting for everyone to get in, if you want to hop in chat, introduce yourself, say hi, tell us where you're coming in from. We can get started in just a minute. Hey, I see our Jonathan Crow is here to participate. If you have any questions, he'll answer all of them for you. All right, while we're waiting, I am going to drop a link in chat. This is a link to a companion guide that will give you all of the scripts and steps that we're going to walk through today. It should be a publicly accessible link on our website that you can click and download. It is like a Word doc, so that's easy to copy and paste from. You may want to go and download that now so that you can follow along with the webinar, because this will be a hands-on, fairly fast-paced webinar. I'm going to drop that in chat again, so that everyone can grab it. All right, it does look like numbers are slowing down a little bit, so we can go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone again for joining us for today's webinar, Extending the Power of NinjaOne via API. This is a hands-on webinar, and it is a technical webinar. We do expect that there may be concepts that we cover that you haven't worked with, and if so, we may be moving a little bit fast-paced for you. Because of that, we did create the companion guide that I did just link in chat. I do encourage you to go download it and have it open while we go through this. It will help you follow along. The webinar will be recorded, so you will be able to go back and listen after the fact if you want to slow down, just pay attention and not follow along if something goes above your head or something you haven't worked with before. So the webinar will be recorded and we will send it out as soon as we can after the fact. We do have both the chat and Q&A function here. The chat is great for you all to interact with each other. I encourage you to do so. You're going to get more out of talking to each other than you do out of us. Although I think this is going to be a great webinar. We always find that everyone learns a lot from their peers on these, so please do engage there. But if you have questions for us, please put them in the Q&A. We will prioritize the questions that are in Q&A over the ones that are in chat. Last housekeeping item, we are giving away a pair of Apple AirPods today. We'll say who on our last slide. It'll be a random person who is in attendance at the time, and we'll go ahead and give those out. We hope we will have time for Q&A, but we've got a ton of information here. And as I said, we will be moving fast so that we can get through all of it. But if you have questions, let us know and we'll try to answer them in the moment. So with that, I'm going to let the team introduce themselves. I'll start with me because I like to talk. My name is Pete Breton. I'm the Senior Director of Product and Customer Marketing here at NinjaOne. And I'm primarily just going to be an MC today because Jeff and Luke really have the knowledge and expertise here. So Jeff, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Jeff Hunter, and I am the Sales Engineer Manager for MSPs here at Ninja, and happy to be talking to you about some API stuff today. Luke, you want to go ahead?
Yep. So I'm Luke Whitlock. I'm a product lead here at Ninja, running ticketing, documentation, and some other bits and pieces. I come from an MSP background. So for, I think, 12 years before I joined Ninja back in October, I was running an MSP as the CTO. I did a lot of work with APIs and I've done quite a lot of community scripts. So I've automated a whole load of different things, especially around documentation. So I've done lots of integrations for like Hoodoo and Halo and other bits and pieces. So yeah, that's where I'm from.
Awesome. I'm going to stop sharing and let Luke take over.
Cool. So today, hopefully you can see my screen and it's saying agenda.
We can, yes.
I think Zoom just crashed and kicked me out. Am I back?
We can hear you, Luke, but we lost your screen, I think.
You lost my screen. Okay, let me try my screen again. Okay, how is that?
Good.
Cool. All right, so yep, the first thing today is we've got that companion guide Peter's posted in the chat. So if you download that, have a look through it. It's going to be like take you through all the steps of everything we're going to talk through today. It's got all the scripts that we're going to use, and it's got some example ways you can connect and all the other bits and pieces you need. The first thing we're going to cover is authentication, so how you can connect to the Ninja API. Like there's a few different methods, so we'll go into detail on each one. We'll then get into the cool things that you can do with the API. So we're going to do 3 examples today. We're going to do a device heat map. Just going to show you how you can do some license reporting, and then we'll look at how you can sync some data over from Intune. So first thing is, so what are REST APIs? So a REST API is kind of like, if you think about it like a menu, it's a list of things which you can request. You've got the ingredients listed, so you can request something and you know exactly what you get back. So the way this works is you're using essentially standard HTTP requests. So whenever you're visiting a website, there's a few different things you can say. You can say, I want to do a get to fetch something. You can say, I want to do a put to update something. You can say, do a post to say, I want to make something new, or you can do a delete. These are like standard requests that are going on between web browsers all the time. So the REST API kind of wraps that up into a formal thing of, you've got a definition, which is normally you'll have documentation saying, okay, if I make this request, I'd expect this exact thing back, or I want to create this object. This is exactly what I need to give the API, and to be able to then hit the endpoint to do a post and make an object. So it's a good way. Like REST is a really nice, easy way for to script things. There was some horrible ones like SOAP in the past, which are a lot more painful to work with, but REST is pretty easy. Most of the time, we'll be representing things in a thing called JSON. So it's like a machine language, but it's very human readable and easy to understand. So now talking a bit more about Ninja's API. So if you want to find our API documentation, the best way is if you log into Ninja, go to administration, apps and API, and then there's a link at the bottom which says documentation. I'd recommend you once you visit it, there'll be a link at the top to say visit the beta one. If you use that, it's a little bit more up to date, and we're going to be swapping that over to the main one soon. Also, you've got the link here directly to the beta one. If you wanted to look at like our full menu of exactly what's going on, there's on the old one, there's a link to Ninja RMM API v2 JSON, which we give it to in a JSON format, or in the beta API documentation. If you click export, there's an option to get it in YAML, which just basically says all the endpoints we've got in a way that you can import it into another tool to view and browse it. And the last thing that I'd recommend you guys do is, if you're not part of the NinjaOne Discord server already, I'd highly recommend you join it. There's a API channel on there where there's a load of the product managers at Ninja keep an eye on it. And there's a great community there who's always happy to help and get people up and running with the API and answer any questions and problems you have. So when we're connecting to the Ninja's API, we use a mechanism called OAuth2. So this is a pretty standard way of doing authentication for APIs on the internet. You'll notice like when you're signing up to like going to log into a Microsoft app and like approve another app to interact with Microsoft, you get like a accept permissions. That's using OAuth2 as well. So the end goal of all the different authentication methods that we've got, there's like a few different ones you can use with OAuth2, and we implement them and they give you slightly different options. Is to get an access token. So I'll talk through more of the options in a minute. But essentially, once you've got an access token, you add that into a header, which is this a bearer access token header for authorization. And then each request you make to the API, as long as it's got that header, that's authenticated you and you'll be able to get the data back. So inside Ninja, we've got, actually, let me see. Let me talk about a few of the different methods first. So we got, when you're creating an application, it's going to ask you which kind of app you want. So for the examples we're going to go through today, primarily, it's going to be an API services machine-to-machine one, which is going to be client credentials, or it's going to be a web PHP Java .NET Core one, which is when we're going to do an authorization token one. But I'll talk through those in more detail shortly. Once you've selected one of those, you'll get a few more options. So we've got a redirect URI is when we need to do an interactive authentication. We need to put in a URL where the request will essentially be sent back. I'll show you that in a minute. And then scopes are saying what level of access do we want to give to this API application, what can it do? So monitoring is essentially read access, management is then write access at a high level. And then allowed grant types is the different ways that we can talk and get tokens. So we can do an authorization code, which is a bit more powerful, but requires interactive and like MFA approval. And then we can do client credentials, which is an easier way to authenticate, which gives you most access you'll need, but just not everything. And then refresh tokens lets you use an authorization token for a bit longer, but I'll talk about those in a sec. So yeah, so to start with, I'll talk about the client credentials one. So this would be when you select a machine-to-machine application. If you go under Administration Apps API, you can create an application there. You'd only want to select client credentials on the grant types. And this will then, when you save it, it will give you a secret. And then when you close it, you can get the client ID. All you then need to do is basically take that client ID and secret, send it to the token URL, which is you basically make a post request saying, here's my username and password, and you'll get back that access token you need for going to make any further calls you need. So the limit here is because it's not an interactive authentication, you can't access all of the endpoints. So essentially, it's endpoints where we need to associate a user. So if you're like reading a secure field, creating documents, doing other things where there needs to be associated with an actual person, you can't use client credentials for that. So it will work for most things, but not all. So the next one is the authorization code flow. So it's an interactive one, so you need to do an MFA prompt, but it gives you access to all the endpoints because it's then associated with a user. So this would be selecting a web PHP one when you're creating an app. You'd want to click both authorization code and refresh token, assuming you'd want to keep the access up. You'd need to put in a redirect URI. So how this works is you make an initial request to the token endpoint, but that will then give you a redirect to, or rather you make an initial request to a browser page where you have to then enter your username and password. That then does a redirect to the redirect URI, where you need to basically capture the output. So I'll show you how, there's some examples of how you can do that in the companion app. So I put in examples for both clients, client credentials, authorization code, and the refresh token. So this will give you access to all the endpoints that we've got. So if you want to do some more complex things, you might need to look at this, but for most things, you should be able to do client credentials. All the examples today are just client credentials. So then refresh token. So this is once you've done your authorization code, and you provide an offline access scope in the login request. You can also get a refresh token, which lets you continue to get access tokens for 30 days by default. What you can do if you wanted to maintain access before without having to continually do interactive login every 30 days is talk to support, and we can switch it to a thing called a sliding refresh token where as long as it's used, it will continue to refresh essentially and remain valid. So for those three methods, if you look in the companion guide, there's some PowerShell examples of connecting with each. So you can create an app in Ninja, put in the details into those three scripts, and they should then let you log in and get the access tokens, which you can play around with. So the next thing is, when I'm working with APIs, the first thing is to really just start exploring them, see what responses you're getting, play out and test them. So there's a good way to do this. It's there's a couple of apps. There's one called Insomnia and one called Postman. The examples I've got in the companion guide, and we'll go through, are for Insomnia today. You can also use PowerShell to explore APIs, and I'll show that through all the scripts. So with Insomnia, if you look in the guide, there'll be a link to the download and things in there. But essentially, once you've installed it, you'll need to make a new request collection. So this is where you can just build up all the different API endpoints to experiment with and test out. Once you made a collection, you can then go and create your first API. You do a new HTTP request. So if we did one and set it to just be a GET request at the top, put in your Ninja URL with /API v2 organization. So for all the API requests, you need to make sure you're putting in your actual Ninja URL essentially. Let me just check the chat quickly. Just making sure you guys can still hear me. Yep, if you put in your Ninja URL, so this depends if you're on like app.ninjaone.com if you're in America, EU for Europe, CA for Canada, OC for Oceania, and then /API v2 organizations. And if you just hit a GET on that straight away without doing anything else, you're going to end up with this missing header and missing required header. This basically means we've not put in that access token to be able to authenticate. So what you need to do is on the auth tab, you can click a little drop down and choose OAuth 2, put in the OAuth endpoint along with your Ninja URL, and then add in a scope of whichever ones you ticked on your app. So probably monitoring and management, but that'd be under advanced settings, and then you can click fetch tokens. So yeah, so if you click fetch tokens, you should then get that access, the access token that we need. And if you click get again, once you've got that, you should then get a list of all the organizations. So you can then explore the API a little more and see exactly what's going on. If you look in the companion guide, I put in step-by-step instructions on how you can do this. And then you can look in combination with the documentation, start exploring different endpoints and having a look around. So yeah, so that was the fetching results again. So yeah, so let's get on to some real world examples. So the first one we're going to look at is a device heat map. So what we can do here is talk to the Ninja API, pull a list of all devices, and look at when alerts were then erased for each of the device, and just make a chart essentially showing you when are most alerts coming in for a device, what day of the week and what time. Just to help you see, like, is there a time when specifically something is going on that maybe you need to do some exclusions for or something else. So yeah, so the steps involved in this is first we're going to need to make a custom field for actually storing the data inside Ninja. And the most important thing with this is once you get past the first screen is to set the API permissions to read and write so we can actually interact with it. It's a step I miss all the time. You also need to set like if technicians can read or write to it or just have it read only. We'll then need to go and set the values in the script. So like just some simple connection details and like the name of the custom field and connect to the API. We then need to grab all the devices out of Ninja and then loop through each of those devices. For each device, we then grab all the conditions that have been triggered from the activities API, parse it and make it look nice, and we inject it into that custom field. So if we look here, so this is what I was just talking about. We're going to use a WYSIWYG custom field type, make sure the API has at least write permissions enabled for it, and make sure the technician is read only as well. And then take the name. So in this case, it's alert heat map. Yeah, so then if you look at the script or the companion guide, there'll be the script for this. So when you run it, it's going to ask you for the client ID and the client secret for your app. But you just need to edit it and put in your, so edit the value and put in your Ninja URL and then the name of that custom field. The next bit is where we're going to make the post to get that token. So we're just going to use client credentials. So we say the grant type's client credentials. We'll pass in the client ID and secret that was requested and typed in, and we're going to use the scope of monitoring, management, and control. So if you only do monitoring and management on the app creation, you just need to delete control from that. The next step we're going to use, so in PowerShell, there's like a command called invoke web request, which is going to like essentially talk to a web server, send either a get, post, put, or any of the other methods, pass in any of the data we want, and then retrieve the response. So we're going to take this auth body, we're going to pass that in into the body section. We're going to automatically talk to the URL, passing in the Ninja URL that we put in. For the content type here, which is an XML XWW form encoded. Most of the time it's application JSON, but for this we just do a form encoded one. That's going to give us the result. So from the result, we want to then look into it, look at the content, which is then going to be the object of the result, which has the like raw HTML. In this case, it's going to be JSON, and just do a convert from JSON to give us a PowerShell object. And then from that object, we then grab the access token. We then put it into an auth header, which you can then use for all the subsequent requests and not have to connect again, at least for an hour. So now we've got that access token. The first thing we want to do is pull all the devices out of Ninja. So we're going to go against the Ninja URL, but then this time we're going to hit the devices endpoint. We're just going to do a get request this time instead of a post. So we just want to fetch the data and we're going to want to just get the application JSON back. Again, we're going to retrieve that content object and convert it from JSON to give us an array of all the devices inside Ninja. So with each of those devices, we're just going to do a simple loop, start looping through them all and then carrying out work on each device. So the first thing we want to do is for that device is we're going to go and get all of the activities for when a condition has been triggered. So this is telling us when has an alert happened on the device to let us build up that heat map. So again, we're doing an invoke web request. We're going to go to the device endpoint, but add in the device ID and then use activities after that. Then what we're going to do here, if you see the question mark and after that, is we're adding in some query parameters. So this is where we can start to do some filtering. So certain endpoints have different parameters where you can change the filtering to just pull down what you want. So here we're going to say, I want only activity type of condition, and I'm only going to want status of triggered. So this is when an alert's fired. Again, do the get, pass in the header, and then convert it back and just grab the activities only from the returned object. Then if you look here, we're just going to start to parse that data and turn it into something that's nice. So there's a couple of helper functions at the start, which essentially take the raw data and make it into that table and make it look pretty. I'm not going to go into those. You can have a look at them if you want. But what we essentially are doing is going through each activity, extracting the day of the week it happened, essentially, and the time, which can then go into those functions to give us a nice HTML heat map. So we do parse the dates and then we pass it into the helper function get heat map, just with the X and Y values up here. So that will just give us back an HTML table essentially, which we can put into a custom field. So we're doing this for each individual device. So what we're going to do is with that, the heat map table we've got, we're going to put it into an HTML attribute of an object. So for when you're updating a WYSIWYG custom field, you essentially need to have an embedded body saying HTML is this. We then put that into the name of the field in essentially a second object, which is the name of the heat map field we had at the start, and then that HTML, which is HTML equals in the actual HTML. It just needs to be an escape JSON string to make it work, and then you can update the custom field with HTML. So that's where we then come onto the right-hand side here, which is making the actual request. So we're going to do a patch here, which is saying for the custom fields endpoint for the device, put in the alert heat map for this one device, basically. And that should then have set it for the device. So we'll finish then looping through, and this should give us a result. Give us a result of here. If we have a look, we end up with an alert heat map like this. And yeah, I think we'll hold questions till the end, just to make sure we've got time to get through everything. But I'll hand back to Jeff now.
Thank you, Luke. Hopefully everyone can see my screen right about now.
It is still appearing to be loading. Oh, there we go.
I think I'm also getting a message that Luke got that I might be getting booted from Zoom.
All right, you're here and we can see your screen.
Excellent. All right, how about now?
There we go. We see it.
All right, sorry about that, everybody. My example is going to be slightly different from Luke's. Luke was taking information from the API and then putting it back into Ninja by patching that custom field. My example is slightly different. I'm going to be using the API to pull information from Ninja so that I can use it in a report format. In this case, a CSV there's a lot of options to extend this so that the CSV can look much nicer if you want to do something with custom formatting. The report that we're going to be generating is a license report or a consumption report or a billing report, essentially something that breaks down for each customer that you have, how many workstations you're using or are managing, how many servers you're managing, how many network devices you might be managing, devices with remote access, and devices that have antivirus. And so we're going to use the API to tabulate all of that, so it gives us a nice clean view, very similar to what we see here on the screen, with a breakdown for each company and then how many devices of all these varying types that they might be using. Step one is going to be generating our API credentials. You can see here on the right-hand side all the settings that you would need to fill out. There's no need for management because we're not actually taking any management actions. We can just do this with monitoring because we're just retrieving that information so we can use it in our report. I did want to thank some members of the Ninja community who worked on this script: Juan Miguel, Steve Mooring, and Alexander Wisfeld. Some others who also helped with that in the Ninja forums. This is a collaborative effort. There's been some iterations to make it a better script, and so big shout out to them for all their hard work. Step two, now that we've generated those credentials, we've gotten our client credentials. So we have our client secret as well as our client ID. We need to go ahead and insert that into lines 3 and 4 of the script here. Again, this script in totality is available through the companion document that is linked in the chat. I'm sure we'll be pasting that a few more times in there before the end of this meeting, but you can find this script in totality there. This is also available in the Ninja Dojo as well. You do have to be a Ninja customer, or at least in a trial, in order to access that. We're then going to connect to the API. You can see that we have established our headers so that we can then retrieve our access token, and then we can go ahead and use that access token to actually pull data from the Ninja API. However, what data do we want? That'll be in the next slide. For right now, we need to go ahead and establish today's date. So that way we can use that within the file name that we're going to create. And then we also need to determine where this report is ultimately going to be saved. That's in line 26. You can see a generic file path right there. Go ahead and modify that to a file path that works for your machine. And that way, when you execute this script, you're going to get that CSV created in the location set in line 26. And then we come to step 5, which I think is probably the most critical step here, because it's probably the one slide that I'll come back to at the end of this to kind of show how you can extend this script to make it more useful for your particular situation. In this case, we are pulling from 5 different API endpoints here, really 3. We're just calling one of them multiple times for some different metrics, but we're calling 5 total API endpoints here. The very top one you can see is devices. Might look familiar from Luke's example. We are pulling a list of every single device that we have in this Ninja environment. Below that, you will see the organization's URL. And that's where we're going to go ahead and pull all the organizations we have in Ninja. That way we can go ahead, tabulate how many devices of each type we have, and then associate them with the proper organization. So that way you get that row by row breakdown for all your customers. Then we come to the remotes, the Bitdefender, and Webroot URLs. I'll point out here that you can see this is calling a group. So you're actually calling a search group. Which search group are you calling? That's defined right here. You can see for remotes, we're calling search group number 16. For Bitdefender, we're calling group 8. And for Webroot, we're calling group 7. These are actually all built-in search groups that every Ninja account has access to. And they all track whether the device has remote access or the particular AV that we're looking for. This is the part that I think is really interesting, because this can be modified to account for anything that a search group can find. So while we're finding Bitdefender and Webroot, if you're using SentinelOne, or if you're using Sophos, or really any other application that we detect in the software inventory, you can create a group that looks for machines that have that particular software installed, and you can add it in here so that way you can tabulate anything that you can create with a search group, which is quite a lot. We'll talk more about other examples towards the end of this, but there's really a lot of, this is a framework I think that you can use to extend what the script would normally do into anything that is particular for your specific environment and your operation. Now we establish all those URLs so that we can then call them in the bottom half. And you can see the invoke REST method. We're going to go ahead and call those URLs. We're putting them into these variables here, the $devices, $organizations, so that we can easily work with it in PowerShell. We then come to step 6. This is where we need to create the table. We're doing this as a customer by customer breakdown for how many devices they're consuming. And so we're going to go ahead and create those rows. And then where we add member below that, we're actually going to be functionally adding columns to that table so that we can track our different metrics. Again, this can be modified so that you can go ahead and track whatever you want to track. You might track more than just workstations and servers. Some people have very granular device types. Maybe you have a point of sale device type. You would have to modify the script so that you could track any devices that were of that type, but it's very easy to then add a column in here so that you can display them separately from maybe a garden variety workstation. In case in point from our example earlier, if you are tracking something like SentinelOne, you could go ahead and add a SentinelOne tab in here, or any other antivirus or any other software that you're tracking with a search group. Now here's another important part. This is where we're going to actually count everything. You can see in line 78 here, we are scrolling through every single device that we have in this environment. And then in line 79, we're going to go ahead and separate those devices out by organization. Now in line 80, if the device is a server, we're going to go ahead and add it to the server column of that table we saw in the previous step. In line 82 here, if it is a workstation, which would be for a Windows workstation, or it is a Mac workstation, we're going to go ahead and add them into the workstations column. And then we do the same in line 84 just for NMS devices, rather than the endpoints that we've been looking at so far. And then going down into lines 87, 88, and 89, you can see we're just looking for any devices that are appearing in those search groups, and then we're adding those devices into the respective column here for whether they have remote access, whether they're using Bitdefender, or whether they're using Webroot. In step 8 here, we are actually starting to format some of this data. And so we're going to go through each organization here. We're doing another for each loop in line 98, where we're going through each organization and we are creating a custom PowerShell object. Now the organization name here in line 100, pretty straightforward, but then in line 101, we're calling we're looking for the organization, we're looking for all workstations inside that organization, and then we're looking at the length here, which is going to go ahead and tell us how many devices each individual objects are in that particular section there, so we can tabulate them. So if you have 9 devices, 9 workstations that were added, we're going to go ahead and count that as 9 devices, so you get a raw number to look at for your count. And we can see we're doing all of that below here for servers, total number of devices, where we simply add our workstations and servers together. In line 104, we do it for NMS devices, and then lines 105 through 107, we're doing all of our remote and antivirus counts as well. And the final step here is going into step 9, which is where we actually format this into a CSV. So in line 113, you can see we're taking all of our results, we're putting it into a CSV, and then where are we putting it? We're putting it in $licenses report, which is where we defined in line 26, the file path that we wanted to export to. Now, as I said earlier, there is a lot of extensibility with this. You can go ahead and track anything that you could potentially track with a search group. Earlier, I mentioned the examples of other antiviruses that maybe we don't have a native search group for. Bitdefender SDK and Webroot, obviously we resell, therefore we have a built-in search group for it. But anything you can create using software inventory could be added. But beyond that, what else do we have inside of search filters? Maybe you want to create a report that shows how many devices have ran an OS patch installed over the last month. Maybe you want to track devices that have had a Ninja backup run within the last month. Those are all things that you can create with search groups and then add to your report. So anything that you can find in the search menu, that is something that can ultimately be added to the report, which I think greatly expands beyond just being able to do your raw device counts, which is valuable, but this can be modified to meet your needs. With that, I will go ahead and turn it back over to Luke for the final demonstration.
Awesome. All right, let's hope I can actually do this without crashing my computer this time.
little peek behind the curtain. As you can see, there are no.
I was
winging.
definitely ready. Cool, right. Can you still hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Cool. Good. All right, so the last example I'm going to give here is
And we all spoke too soon.
I don't know what is wrong with Zoom today. You guys hear me this time? No?
We can.
Cool. All right, let's try that again. Let's just share my screen.
Looks good.
Oh, all right. So the last thing that we're going to look at today is a little bit more complex use case where we're going to talk to both the Ninja API and a different API, figure out what device matches what at both sides, and then write in 3 different custom fields with some useful data that's from the other side. So we're going to look at Intune for this. So we're going to want to pull over a compliance status. We're going to want to give a link to the actual device inside Intune. So you can quickly click on it and see the device there, and also pull out the primary user email address that's associated with that device. So for this one, first one, again, we're going to go create those custom fields we'll need to write to. We're going to populate the required values at the start of the script. We're going to connect to both NinjaOne and Microsoft 365. We're going to pull all the tenants from Microsoft 365 and all the organizations and devices from NinjaOne. Once we've got that, we're going to start looping through by Microsoft 365 tenant. So we're going to fetch all the devices from that tenant. We're going to parse in each device, and we're going to try and do some matching on them then. And then we're going to build up an object, again, parse all the data, and then build up the request to actually create the data inside Ninja. So the first step is we're going to want to do 3 custom fields for this one. One is an Intune primary user and make that a text field. The other one's an Intune compliance status and make that a text field, and then do an Intune URL, which is a URL field. Also, don't forget to add that API permission to the fields on that second screen, just so you've got right permissions there. Again, catches them out every single time, so it's something we're going to improve with a UI refresh shortly. Right, so step 2. So the first thing we want to do is set these custom field names. So these are the names of those 3 fields that we made in Ninja, inside Ninja. Just make sure that we're using the name rather than the label here. So we've got those. When you've run the script, it's going to then ask you for all of the Microsoft details. If you check the companion guide, I've linked to a blog post by one of the other product leads here, who can then who's done a really great blog on getting those tokens that you'll need to talk to Microsoft. And then the last thing again is we'll need to have the Ninja settings. So for this one, it's going to prompt you for the which Ninja instance you're using, rather than having to remember it, or rather than having to set it in the script itself. And the last bit of the setting is, so if you're an MSP and you're using CSP access, you've got a choice here of if you want to document your own tenant or not. So essentially pull all the devices from your own tenant. If you do, you just need to put in your default domain name and the display name there, and set the document partner tenant to true. And the last section here is any serials that need to be excluded. So these are things where you have devices which are going to have the same serial. It's where they basically, when you're using like a VM or you've got like an OEM system you built where a serial number's not been set in the BIOS. I've got the ones which I've used in the past where I've ended up with duplicate ones. So we're just going to ignore those, and that will just end up matching on device name only. So the next step is here, we're going to do what we've got is some helper functions for the Microsoft thing. So this get graph token is one which is going to do the same process as essentially we're doing for Ninja before, which is stepping through each thing, talking to the token endpoint, getting those tokens. For Ninja, we've got a helper function here called connect NinjaOne. So this is where we're starting to do some code reuse. So for this, I've moved out the connect Ninja, like the actual connection process to its own function. So we can just reuse that throughout other scripts. So you can copy and paste this bit out and use it to log into Ninja. Again, it's that same process we used before. Right, so the next part is talking to Microsoft, pulling down all of those customers. Again, here we're doing a new get graph request, which is another helper function. But essentially, this is wrapping in that invoke web request that we were using before. It's just wrapped in a helper function to do like some pagination and other bits and pieces. Once we've got that, we're going to do a select object, which is saying I only want to have the customer ID, the default domain name, and the display name. And we're going to exclude, if you've got any customers you wanted to exclude, that's going to be in there as well. You can do an array of customer excludes. I think that's the setting at the top. Once we've got all the Microsoft ones, if you've got the partner tenant set to true, it will just add that onto that array as well. And then we'll use some other helper functions which is get Ninja orgs, which is going to do that fetch to get all the Ninja organizations, and then get Ninja devices, which will give us those. So we're then going to start the loop and doing the actual work. So we're going to treat it Microsoft tenant by Microsoft tenant to start with. What we want to do is, if you look here, the first step is we're getting a graph token. So this is, we're going to go into a specific tenant's details, get the access token to let them connect. We're then going to go and build up a request array. So this, I've only got one request in at the moment, but you can add in multiple. So this just means you can do one request to Microsoft and say, I'd like all of this different information without having to make a multiple request for each. So if you wanted to expand the script to like fetch device groups or like compliance policies in detail and other bits and pieces, this is where you could add in those other requests and just expand what you can do. We'll then make that bulk request and get the data back. And then we'll extract that device's specific request from there. So this is going to end up giving us all those devices from Microsoft, which we can then start to compare to Ninja. So to match on these, the script's going to first try and match on the serial number. So we'll essentially ignore the ones which are in exclude serials, loop through them all and try and say, basically, does the serial number from Intune match the serial number in Ninja? And if it does, we'll make a new object and add it to a match devices array. We'll then do the same thing, but trying just on name. So we ignore any of the ones we already matched by serial and just try to find ones where there's a name only match. So both of these are only going to match when there's only one object found. So if there's duplicate names, it's not going to match duplicates. So then once we've got those devices, we're going to try and match and figure out which Ninja organization is associated to which Microsoft organization or Microsoft tenant. So we're going to first try and just match the display name. So if the organization name in Ninja matches the name in Microsoft, we'll do that. If it doesn't match, we're going to then try and look to find which Ninja organization had the most devices matched by either of the two previous matches. And then we'll just say, okay, the organization is this one because it's got 10 devices from it and the other one only had one. What we then do in the script is actually we'll run the match again, but this time limiting to that one organization, just in the situation where you had multiple devices with the same name, but in different organizations, or the same serial within different organizations if something hadn't been cleaned up, just to try and then match again, just to see if we can match as much as possible. Right, so then what we want to do is we're going to parse, so for each device that we've matched, we're going to loop through each of them. We're going to parse the compliance state just to make it a bit friendlier. So in Microsoft, it'll be like a lowercase compliant. So we'll just change it to an uppercase and a not compliant if it's not anything other than compliant. We're then going to build up the object that we need to actually post to Ninja. So this time, we're not going to have to do that embedded HTML object like we did before. We can just say set the values to the Ninja field names directly. So be the compliance field equals that compliance state we just made. The URL field we're going to pull from the Microsoft device with the URL, and then the update device, we're going to pull the primary user from there as well. And we'll convert that to a JSON. We'll then take that and do a patch method again to that custom fields endpoint for each of the devices. So we'll repeat this for each device, looping through and setting those custom fields for the device. And then when we are done, we end up with the Intune details inside Ninja custom fields. So you can now hop straight to the device. What you can also do if you wanted to extend it some more is you could add in something which is generating links for the admin portals for that customer, and also a million other things. So yeah.
Alrighty. That was a great walkthrough. Thanks so much for that, Luke. We have, I think, just one slide left here. Sorry, I am gonna pull a terrible webinar move here and just push through them. I forgot there were 50 slides. All right. So thank you so much for those walkthroughs, Jeff and Luke. We do have time for questions. We have to do our obligatory wrap up here. The first is, if you're not a NinjaOne partner, this is a quick overview of our platform, the Unified IT Management Platform that gives you visibility and control over all of your devices. So all of your endpoints, all of your workflows, you can see it gives you the ability to patch all of your endpoints, deploy and manage software, monitor and alert on device health and performance issues. And as we've seen here, really lean into automation across the management of all of your endpoints. We do have our add-on products, our own products, remote access, backup, ticketing, documentation, and our partnerships with third-party security tools like SentinelOne, Webroot, and Bitdefender that we've mentioned today, as well as integrations, which are a lot less interesting than all the things that Luke and Jeff have built for us. If you're not a current partner, please reach out. We'd love to get your hands on the platform so you can try it out. If you are, you can forget everything I just said. And I would like to come to the end here and give away our Apple AirPods. So if you could hop on, that would be great.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Pete. I hope everyone's enjoying the webinar so far. I'll keep it super short and sweet so we can get to your questions. But the winner of these Apple AirPods is Darshak Gozalia. Congratulations, Darshak. Be on the lookout for an email from us and we'll get that out to you.
Congratulations. All right, we have about 10 minutes left for questions, and I'd love to answer any that you have. If you do have questions, we will prioritize ones in Q&A. It does look like there's just one there right now. Actually, there was one from Michael O'Toole that I want to highlight here. I know it was answered via text, but it said, are more detailed or granular scopes planned to be introduced in the future? Luke, I think that'd be a good one for you.
Sure. Yeah, so it's something that me and a load of the other product managers here have been discussing internally quite a lot. We're just trying to figure out the best approach to how we bring some more permissions and granularity to the API. It's definitely something that we want to do. We just haven't got to the actual solution of exactly how to do it yet. So it's in progress at the moment. And just to follow up on another question you asked, Mikey, which is, will the API spec documentation versions be updated in the future in line with API changes? Yes, we are doing some work right now on improving the API documentation. We're picking up on that new beta version and essentially getting it to exactly where we want it to be. So making sure we've got like fully documented which endpoints need client credentials and which don't, make sure the version numbers are starting to increment, and just getting in as much as possible to make people's lives easier to work with it.
Awesome. Thank you, Luke. I have another question here from Scott that you've already answered, but I think it's worthwhile sharing with everyone. I'll read it out. I need a way to pull all ticket numbers from a ticket board using machine-to-machine client credentials. Can't seem to get it to work. Any thoughts there,
Yep.
Luke?
So right now, that's one of those endpoints where, because ticket boards are unique to each person, which ones you can see, that's limited to be user only. It's something I'm working on fixing in the ticketing team right now. For the moment, if you can't use where you can't use client credentials, what you can do is do a one-off interactive auth to get that refresh token using a script. If you talk to support, you can get that refresh token changed to being a sliding one, which will continually then refresh as long as it's used. And that's what you can then put in to run on the script on a regular basis to get that access token without having to constantly do the MFA re-authentication. I know that apparently that's not worked for you at the moment, but yeah, if you chat to support, there might be something they can help with. But fixing the actual problem of getting client credentials on those endpoints is something that I'm working on with the ticketing team.
Awesome. Thanks, Luke. We have another question here from Artem. It seems like the API exposed for the REST API is different than from what is available on the Ninja backend. here's a particular example. Is it possible to move a workstation between orgs and locations using the API?
Not today, not using the public API, no.
Okay. I will say, Artem, when Ninja started, you can definitely say we did not take an API first approach when we built the platform. And so there are things that are just not exposed. Joseph had a follow-up. We use AutoTask PSA. Using the API, can I pull in the most current, say, 3 open tickets for clients?
Yep. So for the moment, we've got device custom fields you can set through the API. So you could certainly talk to the AutoTask API, pull down the tickets associated for each device, parse out the top 3, and then put that into a custom field. We're also about to introduce API endpoints for organization and location custom fields. So at that point, you'd be able to just pull the top 3, the 3 most recent open tickets for an organization and put that in an organization custom field.
Awesome. And Joseph says, thank you. All right. I think I don't see any other questions here. So I think we can wrap up. Luke, Jeff, thank you so much for this walkthrough. Everyone who participated, I hope this was helpful. We will send out the slides, the recording, and the companion guide when we send this out. And thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.